Hello, everyone. So this is the panel titled No Climate Change Without Us, How to Make Access to Live Events Environmentally Sustainable. And I'm very excited to hear from our wonderful panelists that we have this afternoon. My name is Dominique and I will be chairing today's panel. I am a climate justice activist and writer focused on the intersectional climate action to make sure that no one is left behind. I'm also part of an organisation called Climate Live, which harnesses the power of music to unite people through concerts, to engage, educate and empower people to take climate action, and part of the steering committee for the Youth Climate Justice Fund, the first global youth-led fund for climate justice. And this is a very special discussion to my heart as someone who works at the intersection of climate and music, who is neurodivergent and disabled, and someone who has been working and organising in the climate movement since I was a teenager. So very excited to delve into this conversation today, and thank you all for joining us. So without further ado, would love our panel to introduce themselves. So please tell us who you are, what your role is, and what motivated you to join this panel. We can start with you, Harry.
Hello everyone, my name's Harry and I work for Team Love in Bristol but also run Accessible Events Limited, and what we do is we work with shows to try and get them on the Attitude is Everything Charter, and we're trying to also work in the sustainability aspect within it because it's kind of been forgotten about, let's just say, and it's a time that we sort of woke up and like we're fully inclusive really. Yeah.
My name is Blaine Harrison. I'm a musician, songwriter, a band called Mystery Jets. I'm more used to singing rather than speaking, so apologies if I sound a bit nervous. But I've been a patron of Attitude is Everything, which was started by Suzanne Bull, MB, over here, about 24 years ago, I think it was. I've been a patron for about 17 years, and I suppose my interest in it is to make gigs and shows as accessible as possible for both audiences and artists.
Okay, right. And hello everyone, my name's Feimatta Conteh, my pronouns are she, her, and if anyone needs an audio description, I'm a light-skinned brown woman with a big afro, a colourful top and wearing dark trousers. I'm sitting in this panel sort of in my previous role, so until sort of mid-December, I was the Environmental Sustainability Manager for Factory International, a big organisation in Manchester that's recently opened Aviva Studios, which is a large arts venue just in Manchester. And I've recently started, I think this is my 7th week, as a Senior Manager for Environmental Responsibility at Arts Council. So I very much feel that I've taken a different seat around the table, and I'm really fascinated about, like Dominique was saying, the intersections between access and sustainability, because one of the things I often think in this space is no one wins unless we all win. So how do we work towards that kind of thing? So no climate action without us. So delighted to meet you all.
Exactly, yeah. Amazing panelists. I just love hearing about your journeys and how you've gotten here and the work that you do to make sure that environmental justice that we are reaching for is something where equity is in the solutions, which is what we so desperately need. And a question to all panel members: why does it matter if sustainability solutions are accessible to disabled people? And Harry, do you want to kick us off?
So kind of as I was saying, sustainability should be inclusive to all, and its pillars form on social, economical and environmental factors. So why is that not including accessibility innately a part of it? Generally, disability comes at an extra cost to that person, whether it's financial, social, economical. In terms of like practical things like public transport, you know, is it always accessible? No, not always. You know, if you're neurodivergent, is it going to be too overcrowded? Is it too much of a sensory overload? I know I struggle with that quite a lot. Also practically as well, you know, distances, drop-off points. Everyone else can go and get this bus, but actually I've got to walk a lot further in between, and that's not something that I could do. So it means I'm going to have to drive. Yeah, and this kind of thing, it matters because not only are we being singled out as part of a disability, but then on top of that, a sustainability issue within that. I think that's probably leads on to you.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think ultimately, to put simply, you know, I think obviously we all share the planet, so I think environmental initiatives and measures should be accessible to everybody. I think a big kind of mantra for Attitude is that no one should be left behind. And I think, we're in a whole new era of green events, and I think the accessibility movement and the environmental movement have a lot to learn from each other. I think there's a lot of sort of shared research that we can pull from. I think also, just again put simply, I think, it's proven that I think feeling connected to nature makes us far more incentivized to fight to protect it, basically. So let's make, sustainable initiatives as accessible to as many people as possible, so people aren't left out of the conversation, particularly disabled people.
Yeah, I was thinking about what Teresa was saying when she was up here with Farah talking about the project, things about that idea of collaboration and like not one voice or one particular way of seeing things dominating, but how can you actually create a space where every voice is kind of equally valid? And again, that kind of point of like looking at the climate crisis not just through one lens, because solutions aren't going to come just from like a scientific or technological thing. You mentioned before there, Harry, it's kind of environmental and social and political, or in like a permaculture thinking, it's people and prosperity, and I've forgotten the last one, place maybe. But how do you bring all of those bits of knowledge together and sort of think about what solutions we're going to create for a better world that works better for everybody? You know what I mean? Because I think if you're looking towards creating a more positive world and it doesn't work for everyone, then you haven't actually answered that. And I think some of the work that's in this kind of starting to connect accessibility and sustainability is the way to sort of do that. And I guess, sorry, please jump in and stop me waffling when I get there, but I was really struck when I started working at Factory International that there was already an access manager in post. And so Kate, Fox and I, as the sustainability and access managers, but definitely felt like we needed to collaborate, not just because we were people in the organisation that people didn't always want to listen to, but how do we actually connect access and sustainability? And I was just thinking as I was preparing for this, Kate used to have a phrase that they would say quite often, that pace is an ableist construct. So that idea of when you're working in the arts and cultural sector, you work at pace so constantly, but actually when you're doing that, who are you excluding from being part of the process? You're excluding anybody who can't keep up, basically. So you're prioritising kind of able-bodied, potentially young people without caring responsibilities, so much there. So I kind of adapted that to say that pace is an ableist and unsustainable construct. But then it's like, well, how do you buy the time to do the thinking? So apart from keep reminding people, it's about sitting down and thinking. And actually, I think something like this toolkit that's been developed kind of could help with that, you know what I mean? It's like you don't always have to sit down and think of everything yourself.
Yeah.
Other people might already have the ideas, like borrow, share, swap knowledge.
Exactly, and I love the point that you all made about the different lens, like not just looking at sustainability in the world from one lens and the importance that there is in that, and that there's so much that the environmental movement can learn from the accessibility movement as well. And it reminds me of a quote by Audre Lorde that there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we don't live single issue lives, so something to live by. And leading on from that, open to anyone to answer, if we think about some of the standard access facilities such as viewing platforms and accessible toilets, what are the main challenges in making them sustainable, and what can we do differently?
I don't mind jumping in on this one. I love talking about toilets. I think in terms of sustainability, there's been quite a bit of a gap that people haven't been thinking about in terms of toilets. Traditionally, an accessible toilet, the green plastic poly ones, they're not actually that accessible. They haven't got enough of a turning circle, and it's a really good movement to start working towards compostable ones, but they come with their challenges as well. Like, for instance, they first started off as just a bigger box rather than anything. So we need to start working with suppliers to make them with the the accessibility facilities with the rails and things. Another thing we could be working on is recycling, actually on the viewing platforms. It's quite an easy win. A lot of the time it's just one bin, and then you have to scoop it all up, and then it's like, oh, we're going now, so we'll just put it in there. Why not just have the bins that separate at the top? It's, again, win-win. And there's some issues around power as well. I think there's quite a connotation that as accessible people we take more power, and that again lives quite heavily. And how can we start working to, talk about it and create an open plan about, let's make a sustainability plan around electronic usage. Like, is it better at night when it's not going to be used so widely across site? What can we do? Just start that conversation. We don't have to know the answers already.
Yeah, you don't have to know the answers, do you? You just have to start the conversation and see where the thoughts go. And the idea of being like, you haven't actually had the conversation yet. And I think maybe people have feared to have the conversation because they don't have the answer. It's like, well, how are you going to get to the answer unless you start talking? Sorry, Blaine, I'm probably going to go.
Yeah, I think the point you made about electricity, Harry, is a really good one. I think particularly with this move towards more off-grid festivals, eco-friendly festivals, like there's some amazing ones out there. Like Shambhala is a great example, and I think something you do see come up on websites is that disabled attendees are warned that there isn't unlimited electricity supplies, and so there's I think there's room for kind of R&D and ideas to be developed there. I mean, I've got some kind of crazy ideas, like I was chatting to a really nice guy called Jonas outside, and he was talking to me about bicycles, and I thought, well, what about making like kinetic power? I don't know what you'd call it, like basically having electric bikes set up at festivals where people can jump on them and just generate power. I think also more investment into solar energy at festivals would be a really good place to direct more attention as well.
Yeah, just I guess because my experience in this space isn't necessarily in the greenfield and live events thing, but just kind of thinking about what we were doing in that large venue that just opened this year. It's not really associated with sustainability or whatever, but I just wanted to share a little story from this weekend. I was at an event at Aviva Studios, even though I don't work there anymore, and I was in the toilet and I saw somebody come out of the changing places toilet in their electric wheelchair. We just had this moment of being so excited that there's a changing places toilet integrated into the mainstream toilets in there, and that idea of not sort of separating disabled access provision from everybody's provision. And then also just talking, because attitude is everything, we're involved in helping develop some of the accessibility at Aviva Studios. And there's not just one changing places toilet there, there's also one backstage. And for me, and I remember talking about this with our access manager, and it was this real, those moments where you have a realization and you just feel like such an idiot that you didn't have it before. Because when I was thinking about accessibility in venues, I've always thought about it like from the audience perspective, but it's also disabled people aren't just audience members. Sometimes they work in places too. So I don't know, sorry, it's slightly off track for the conversation or anything, but I don't know if in your experience you've kind of had any thoughts about accessibility backstage, or whether it's kind of all pushed on like, we'll do this for audience members and visitors, but whether people actually think about what it is backstage. And I think sometimes that can also be in terms of sustainability. It can all be front of house because we don't need to think about back of house. And you're like, but it's all connected.
Definitely. No, there's so many good points that I don't know if any of you guys wanted to add in.
I mean, I could go on forever.
But yeah.
You have accessible toilets backstage and things at Forwards Festival.
Yeah, we have one at every point of every stage, and at the guest bar as well, and also behind at production. As part of the charter as well. There's kind of like a really good checking system of going around and checking that everything is in place. And in terms of artists as well, there's the artist rider packs that people can use. So it's really good resources that are already there, and they're really easily digestible. So it makes everyone's life a lot easier, I think.
Because you just mentioned there about artist riders, is that kind of like access riders and things? Because I know in the sustainability world there's been a movement to kind of develop green riders, and could you imagine a world where someday somebody turns up with their access rider and their green rider and they're like, this is what I expect from you. That's the vision. I'm looking forward to that happening. So a green rider saying that, as an artist, I'd expect you to kind of not have plastic backstage, or, whatever it is. I know there's some issues around kind of single-use plastic in terms of accessibility and disability, but that would be an amazing thing to happen for people to have access and green riders in the same breath.
So many great ideas. Access riders and green riders, that is the future. And you guys have already kind of touched on this, But in the research from the toolkit, it highlighted that there are a lot of supply issues, such as the lack of availability to local suppliers for accessible facilities, which of course increases the carbon footprint of the events, let alone for them being sustainable. So how can the industry solve this problem? And Blaine, do you want to start us off on that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think obviously shared public transport to events and festivals is the ideal, but I think for obvious reasons it's problematic for some disabled audiences. Just for example, shuttle buses are often quite hectic environments and quite overwhelming for people with sensory issues. Long queues, tricky for standing up. Someone, such as myself on crutches, I really struggle with that. So, and drop-off points can be really far away. Trains, obviously the greenest form of transport, very expensive in this country if no one's noticed. 40% of stations in the UK are not step-free. Even in London, 2/3 of the tube is not step-free, which seems mad in this day and age, but that is the case, and taxis are often the most, efficient form of transport, but more expensive. So I think there's things we can do. I think it's felt in the disabled community that the whole transport network needs a complete overhaul. I mean, I don't think we're going to do that today. But, I think more accessible trains, buses and stations, more charging points for electric scooters and chairs, a more extensive training of staff to assist travellers. That's becoming difficult with the cutting of ticket offices at stations, which started to happen in this country. I think cars, for a lot of disabled event goers, cars are required. They're just they're a necessity basically to get to festivals. But then a lot of green and eco festivals charge a levy to offset carbon emissions. And I think in an ideal world, I think if disabled drivers can prove their requirement, their need for a car, there should be free car parks at arena gigs.
I think
for
that does happen quite a lot. There's a lot of really good policies out there, where you supply your evidence and then you speak to your particular festival, and if you start that conversation, most people are more than happy to accommodate. I think it's just about having, knowing that you can do that, and not being a barrier with an assumption, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And then I think following on from that, it'd be great if there was more accessible innovations to then be given the chance to offset our carbon emissions. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Ooh, that's an interesting concept. I'll park that one for a minute. I've got some ideas as well about maybe we can start working a little bit more with local councils specifically. I mean, yes, around transport, but also about hireable facilities. There's a massive shortage, basically, across the whole country. So maybe each borough council could start working together to have their own pool of them and hire them out, or vice versa, have a sustainable list of approved suppliers, and maybe working with that council to be part of the sustainable incentive. They're kind of moving along that journey naturally, and it's kind of becomes a little bit more, I don't want to say innate, but guided, and it can be quite an easy solution. But again, it's about talking about it, and we've got loads of pools of knowledge, but we're not pulling them together.
And I wonder if, because it just caught the end of Farah and Teresa's presentation, they're saying actually people are using this toolkit over this year and reporting back, and by September, if there's a space for either on the Attitude is Everything website or Greener Festival, whatever, having that kind of resource for people to dig into, or a list of suppliers, and just to know where people can source this stuff, and yes, fair enough, there might not be a lot of suppliers of accessible and sustainable equipment across the country, but if people start using it and demanding it, then that's how it builds and can get more.
It's pretty much weekly I get an email from someone going, do you know a supplier? Can you get a HDU unit? Or I've had recently people ringing me going, do you know how to design one? And I'm like, well, we need to start having these conversations, because there is such a shortage. I mean, not even at the festival season, which is obviously my really busy period, and people are asking for them constantly now. So we should be really having them within each council, or pooled areas within the city that are hireable resources. Then it reduces a lot of the carbon footprint in itself, and the resources will be up to standard.
Definitely. It's such an important point that you guys have made there, and it also shows the importance of engaging more people on this, so more people are aware of this. And interestingly, in the toolkit, the research also highlighted that the jargonistic and kind of idealistic language and terminology of sustainability excludes disabled people from understanding information and from the climate change debate kind of in general. And as a communicator, this is something I'm always reflecting on. How best do we communicate the issues? How best do we engage in a really inclusive way? And so I'd love to know from all of you, what can we do to change this?
So if I just come in, because I remember when we were doing the industry roundtable of this, somebody made a point, and again, it's like, oh, I've not thought about it before. Like in a lot of events and spaces, like sustainability, communicating about sustainability has kind of gone off into the marketing world of like, look at the brilliant world that we're all creating, whereas information about access is really like practical.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you actually, bring those two things together? And like you say, move beyond the sort of jargonistic or very kind of, sort of fluffy world that you're talking about in sustainability, but also make access be like a really exciting thing to be talking about. It's like bringing those two kind of communication modes together and saying we're accessible and sustainable, and this is what we're doing and how we support it. So.
Exactly.
I think for disabled event goers, the decision whether to go, whether a festival or a gig, whatever it is accessible, that journey sort of starts right from landing on the event website, the ticketing website, and thinking, okay, how much is it going to cost to get there? Is it going to be a welcome environment? Am I going to have access to, all the supplies that I need? So I think right from the get-go, from a kind of information point of view, that language does need to be accessible and, not jargonistic. I think quite often what you'll find on event and festival websites is that the sustainability information and the accessibility information are on completely different parts of the website. I think if there's a way of kind of integrating those more so that they're in one place. And I mean, also the other thing I'd say is, we're living in a very visual world. We're living in the age of social media. I think I'd love to see more festivals and events doing things like video walkthroughs of festival sites, showing ground conditions, facilities. This is something that I actually do. I make TikTok videos from an artist perspective, showing what venues, how accessible venues are backstage, and try to show the other side of it as well. And I really started doing that because no one else was doing it. And I think I'd love to see venues and organisers take up that initiative and actually show, their customers what they can expect when they arrive.
You could add into that as like, and this is how you can be sustainable as you're doing that. Because I just realised at Factory into Aviva Studios, we've got a what to expect as part of the access thing, and like not video, but like photos of the spaces, and this is what and this is the quiet times and whatever. And it's like, but you could just easily add in there, and this is the recycling bins, and this is where the bike stands are. We've got an accessible bike stand, and it's like, well, so some ideas I'll take back. Well, not I'll pass on to people again now, but how do you link those two things up? It's brilliant.
Some of the shows that we've started doing now, we've got the access information pack that we send out, and then at the bottom of it or the back of it, we've got our sustainability policy. So we're sort of adding them naturally as a continuation, so they're all in one place. But I do think there needs to be a bit more of a crossover, especially on the website aspect, like touching on that. You've got one page, as you say, about accessibility, you've got sustainability, but I think we need to be doing a little bit more audience engagement around myths and sort of false assumptions. I think a lot of people go, I can't do that because it's not going to be as accessible, but actually some of the shows that we do, most of the transport is wheelchair accessible, so why don't we just tell people about it? Because we're doing lots of stuff, but we're not communicating it, so could we create socials around it, like true or false? Higher audience engagement, and then maybe some prizes around that happen when you're actually on site, so you've kind of created a bit of a buzz around it before you've even arrived. I don't know, that's just
Myth-busting.
Definitely. Demystifying what's happening, definitely. And I love these points that you made about the visions of combining sustainability with accessibility. That's so needed for people to be engaged in. And you touched a bit on it, Harry, about what's already happening, but I know that Forwards Festival are featured in the toolkit as a case study. Can you tell us a bit more about what you've done to address access and sustainability as that combined solution that we were talking about? And what were the barriers? How did you solve them, if you managed to?
it's really funny because I didn't really think about what we did too much. You just kind of get on and do it when you're on site because it's just like, okay, well, this is not going to work, so we're going to have to make it work. Going back to toilets, my favourite subject. The standard plastic polys, they don't actually hold that much in capacity, so they fill up a lot quicker. So when working with compost or whichever supplier, it's like making sure that it's a really practical thing, but the actual bed that holds everything in it is big enough to withstand some of the main stage shows at a viewing platform because you can't actually get in to empty it. We worked with them as well, specifically, as I said earlier, about they just provided a larger wooden box. It's like, well, that's not going to work, really, is it? So, you know, we need some lighting, we need handrails. The sanitizer needs to be within reach. Really, really basic things that I just got very frustrated about. So we had a little bit of a chat, and now things are a little bit better, and they work on each different things. What else we did was switching from having coded padlocks. So accessible toilets, they get a lot of, I would say, abuse from non-accessible users. Therefore, as I say, they fill up quicker, so we have to put some sort of protection on them. Traditionally, we did coded padlocks, which I know some of the other shows do, but quite often they were going missing, so I was having to replace them. I'm not very good with mobility myself, and especially if I'm frantic, I can't do the buttons. And that happened a lot on site, so sometimes I was having to go with bolt cutters and cut them off and then replace them. So we were just constantly in this feed. So we thought about, well, radar locks, radar padlocks. It's a national scheme anyway. People, if they need them, generally will have that key. And if they don't, and it's a specific event requirement here, we can rent one out. So it's like a £10 deposit, and then you get the key, and we give it back at the end. And that's worked really, really well, actually. It's a bit of an extra infrastructure at the beginning, but actually, I think financially as well, as a sustainable thing, it's worked out a lot better than continually buying padlocks.
Just on that radar, because I've got a radar key, and they are brilliant. Are there any product designers here? Because radar keys are brilliant, and you can get into the toilet, but the problem is if you're in the toilet, there's nothing stopping the next person coming in with the radar key and opening the door. Suzanne, you know what I'm talking about. I think if there's anyone with any brilliant ideas of how to fix that, because they are fantastic. It's a universal key to get into toilets, but it's just quite a simple, important detail that no one really thought.
One thing that we managed to do is, because it's on a chain, it swings around, and then when you're inside it, the lock is inside with you, and then you lock it. So we have solved that one.
Have you patented it?
No, definitely not. Maybe we should, but
to make that national.
Well, we're trying. Other things that we did, what was in the case study, was around single-use plastic. Obviously, it's a big thing. So water bottles. Obviously, everyone went to cans, which was really, really good. But at the same time, there were some people who, again, mobility, dexterity, had problems opening them, so they were having to go to other people. So, you know, we are facing these things. If we make a big change here, we've got to think, actually, there might be some negotiation needed in other areas, and that's okay, as long as we're just thinking about it and being a little bit more conscious. When I was actually thinking about it, we did loads of stuff as well. With the sensory spaces, ensuring that they are recyclable cable ties, so each time they can be used, and it's not single use, as well as also, you know, the lanyards and passes that you have. We try to encourage customers to give them back, and then we can use them each show, because frequently they just go off, and then we're not only just buying them repeatedly, but where are they going? Some people keep them as a memento, but a lot of shows with regular customers, they're happy to give it back and then keep that going over. I suppose going back to litter as well, which is always glamorous, but making sure we've got litter pickers on the viewing platforms doing sweeps like you would everywhere else. That helps. And something that I thought was really, really cool, it's not particularly to do with accessibility, but they introduced, you know, the old camera films that used to, the little pot things. They introduced those to put your fag butts in. So that was just a really nice thing that, you know, was brought in. I was like, oh, that's really cool. But it's not necessarily to do with accessibility, but it's accessible to all to some extent.
You're talking about recycling. There's some places, I know it's in, I think I read it was in Slovenia, in Ireland, parts of Canada, where recycling points at events are fitted with Braille stickers. That's still not actually implemented in the UK. So that feels like an obvious thing, but there's an improvement to be made there. Yeah.
Well, definitely. Yeah, thank you for sharing all of those ideas. It's really great to hear how much has been implemented and quite insightful as well. And as we're kind of wrapping up now, I would love to ask all of you, what are the next steps for the industry in light of what we've spoken about? And Feimatta, do you want to start us off?
I was just sitting and reflecting on this, and I was thinking actually how much my practice and thinking as a sustainability person was deeply enriched by working alongside somebody who was an access specialist, and just realising how much more it made me reflect that actually you have to include access and sustainability if you're thinking about climate action in a positive way for me. So I think that broadening out of lenses with which to view climate action and realising that it's not just one way of approaching things, and the massive importance of including everybody in the conversation.
Definitely.
I think for me, and I, now in my new seat around the table at Arts Council, kind of carrying that through in the work that I'm doing, I think is something I'll take from it. Thank you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Amazing. Blaine, do you want to
I
go?
think as Farah and Teresa said earlier, I think today really is an invitation to organisers to use this toolkit. It's an amazing pool of resources, and I think, if possible, to make a pledge to really report back on how useful it was, what didn't work, what could be improved, and if you are putting on events, find out who your disabled audiences are, find out how useful it was for them. I think that's about communication. And I'd also encourage anyone here who isn't familiar with Attitude is Everything to find out about the Live Events Access Charter, because it's an amazing scheme whereby essentially venues and festivals and events are awarded either a silver, bronze, gold, or now a platinum award based on how much of a commitment they've shown to, to be open to disabled artists and audiences. And that's everything from accessible facilities, accessible ticketing, transport, communication, breakout spaces, bar access, staff training, all of these things. And just last year we had the first ever gold grassroots venue was awarded to the Exchange in Bristol. Green Man got the first festival in Wales to win the Gold Award, and the South Bank Centre is the first ever venue to win the Platinum Award, which is absolutely amazing, and it really shows that people are really committed to the cause.
Sorry to jump in, I don't know how you're going to get there. I wonder if there is that sort of overlap, if you can see what a venue's sustainability rating and access rating is, and it'd be really interesting to see if there's kind of a mismatch in that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, if Attitude is Everything and AGF would ever think about teaming up to kind of, rating, not just combined ratings.
I mean, I kind of see the toolkit as the beginnings of the Charter for Sustainability.
Yes.
That's kind of where I instantly kind of saw it. It's like, oh, right, okay, so if you're on the Charter, you might as well just mirror it with your sustainability policy at the same time, because it's almost less work to do it all in one than it is to try and pick it out individually. So, I think also just really continuing being open about going to suppliers and telling them about demand that's like not being met, and like also going to the makers, I suppose, and like going, what makes something fully accessible, and like starting from the root and not being scared to just go, okay, we need to do something a little bit better, and just sort of, rather than waiting for a solution, let's go and be a little bit more proactive about creating it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all of your insights on that. That's so important to be implemented, and these discussions need to keep happening, and then actually be implemented and created, and having everyone in the conversation is so crucial. And we just want to move on to the Q&A part of the session now. If anyone has any questions for our wonderful panelists. Oh yes, do we have a roaming mic?
There's one just coming down there. Oh.
Hi, thank you for that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so my name's Jane. I'm from Edinburgh and Napier University, and we've just done a lot of research recently looking at people with dementia and their obviously carers and supporters in terms of access to the cultural sector. We've done a lot of work with museums and galleries, but also festivals and events. And obviously early onset Alzheimer's can impact people in their 40s and their 50s. So it's not just an old person's disease. So I just wondered if that's something that any of this research has touched on. Okay.
Really interesting question.
No, that is,
Yeah,
that's
do
a
you,
very
Farah,
interesting
sorry.
question,
Yeah.
but I'll pass it on to Farah.
Who
to
did the
answer that.
research?
Yeah, the expert here.
Hi. Yeah, some of the festivals who we talked to and the festival organisers that we talked to did, although not specifically look at things like Alzheimer's and dementia, talk about some of the very family-friendly festivals that they're working on and how some of those more complex needs are, how they're sort of navigating that, especially, you know, when you have these really intergenerational spaces. You have, you know, needs for young children, and then you have like really complex needs for older people or for people with multiple chronic health issues. So it's something that's come into it and has informed some of this. But also, I think that there's far more, of course, and we'd love to hear like more of your experiences of doing that. It would be great to connect up afterwards.
Thank you, Farah. That was such a great question. Thank you. And does anyone else have a question? Oh, Mike, please.
Hi, I'm Holly. I work for OnePlan, which is event mapping software. I was just wondering, because we have a lot of objects that help people plan their events, put out like the accessible toilets. We've got the obvious ones like that. I was wondering if there are any like the key aspects that might be missed during like accessible planning for event, the like facilities that need to be there at a festival, because I think it's something that we need to become stronger on, and I would love to go back and say this is what we need to make these festivals accessible and help event planners add that into their event plans.
I think,
Wanna
sorry,
go
do you
for
mind if I...
Yeah, no.
I think there's a really easy solution with that, is in creating an access map, first and foremost, so it's visual and you can plot things on it. It depends on like how advanced your software is, whether you can plot yourself on it and map your journeys of where you are in distances. I know some apps are able to do that. But I think, yeah, start with something visual, plotting things. You can have a lot more symbols as well, and creating sort of less big, wordy, chunky documents. And like what you were saying as well about we're starting to do more filming around things. I've been making documents for how many years now? They're 30 pages long of access packs. I'm like, no one's going to actually read all this. No. It's too much. So we need to be changing, and also with our audiences and how they engage, we need to be sort of switching that. So maybe doing some more socials and videos and how-tos, or this is what we're doing. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, just over the last couple of festival seasons, I've seen incredible like innovations at festivals, things like rumble packs and sensory aids. They're now starting to bring in VR sort of AI augmented, basically like.
Is that Give Vision?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where people who are partially sighted can actually have what's happening on stage be augmented by AI in real time, which is like. I can't even get my head around how that works, but it's incredible, and it's already starting to roll out. But certainly rumble packs and sensory aids, things like breakout spaces, these are things that we're really starting to see at festivals, which are a complete game changer that 10 years ago you wouldn't even imagine. So I think people need to know about them, because they make festivals, they make events much more, it incentivizes people to want to go to them, and it makes events feel more accessible. So yeah, we need to know about these things happening.
Thank you. Yes, another question?
Hi, I'm from Cambridge Folk Festival. And I wanted to ask your opinion about physical accessibility to different types of site, different parts of the site. So it links into what you were saying about how we talk about sustainability and accessibility. And so a lot of priority is put on accessible stages and loops, but what about, how do you feel about accessing the more natural sides? Like if there's a woodland on site, we have a pond on site that can be accessed by different abled bodies and things like that. And it means it's limiting people's access to the positive sides of natural spaces, like the calming effect and things like that. So do you think that should be a priority as well as access to toilets? Or
Yeah, I think you need to be provided. You can't make everything fully accessible. So if you're not able to do that in a physical way, you might be able to look at other areas of your site that you could offer something that gives the same type of experience. And that's not always an easy solution. And it really does depend on the actual site. But yeah, woodlands are a frequent issue.
Equally as important for
Yeah.
everyone to be able to visit a woodland as it is for them to visit a toilet, because it has benefits.
Yeah, absolutely.
Experience in the festival and as a person with mental health.
I just had, sorry to jump in, I just had a thought in here about that, and I don't know kind of how it is in the outdoor festival world, but kind of in sustainability and things, it's that idea of like being honest about where you are now and what you're able to do and what you're trying to do, and the fact that we haven't got there yet, but we're working towards that. And I don't know in terms of access, it's that idea of like, I know kind of people go, I'm not going to launch my carbon reduction plan yet because I don't know exactly everything. It's like, no, have the conversation. So you go like, okay, we would really like to make the woodland accessible. We're not able to do that yet. So this is where we're at. And it's not, do you know what I mean? It's like start to have the conversation with your audiences and things like that, rather than going, we have to wait until we have the perfect solution and we won't mention anything until then. You know?
No, yeah, it's such a good point. Just starting it doesn't have to be perfect. But that was a really great question on access to nature as well. Thank you.
Yeah,
and go
really
for
important.
it.
Hi, Chris from Shambhala. One of the challenges that we've had is training temporary staff, particularly contract staff, about invisible disability.
Yeah.
And I was wondering whether in the toolkit, because I think it might be useful for a lot of festivals, whether there was an off-the-shelf gold-plated version of that kind of training.
Yes, there is, and Alex can tell you.
Just, you see, we're participating.
Yes, hi, Alex, Matthew does everything here. You guys are great. One of the things we're working to develop with our training manager, Dominique, is around short courses for security in particular. So a huge shortfall has been around training security professionals in accessibility practices, as they're often the first point of contact. So short form courses which start before arriving on site, and then quick do's and don'ts that you can do in a pre-briefing while on site, that 5-minute, here's the final points you've got to remember.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's really
Right, anyone on the panel also wants to add anything?
I know some shows that I've started to work with have provided, well, they said that going to start doing modules within accessibility as part of the pre-site training for security. I haven't seen it develop fully, yes, no, not actually seen what it looks like, but I know that conversation's happening like industry-wide as well. It's just how that transpires onto site, yet we're yet to see what that looks like, but at least we know that people are thinking at the offset before you've even got to site, you have actually got to go through these modules. Whether people are ticking boxes mundanely or whether they're engaging them, we can't test that yet, but hopefully, if that's not working, we find another way of trying to communicate. Yeah.
Thank you, Harry. Did you two want to add on anything to that?
No, I don't think I've got anything to add on that, but it's a really important point, isn't it? And also that idea that security are often the first people that people see in there. So actually, you know, briefing of security on where the recycling bins are, or where, you know, access provision is, or, you know, things connected with your sustainability is so important, because they're the first kind of people that you see as you're coming into a festival. So thank you for that.
Definitely. And just talking about the toolkit, I wanted to touch on this before we wrap up. How do you feel that artists, all artists, can also be involved in engaging with the toolkit and what they can do to support this as well? Blaine, do you want to answer this?
I mean, I'd love to see other artists, not just disabled artists, sharing the toolkit and sharing the findings, talking about them, and really just more kind of, I suppose, networking in the music industry, of people just, you know, becoming aware of, it's just increased awareness about this kind of crossover between sustainability and accessibility. Like I said, you know, I think we're living in a very visual world, so I think videos possibly slightly sexier than sharing PDF documents. But I think, you know, the knowledge is all in there. I think it's just about making it feel, incentivizing people to take action and making it you know, kind of sexy, basically. I think that's important. Also, I think this slight move away from accessibility, but Earth%, who are present out there, are an amazing organisation, and that's a way for artists to get involved, you know, in climate activism. And it's essentially what Earth% has done is they've made the Earth a registered co-writer. So now any artist can credit the Earth, whether it's 1% or 100% of their songwriting royalties as a co-writer in their music. We worked on a song for Earth% with my band last year, and for Earth Day, and it was fantastic. It's like, and it's a great way to incentivize fans to, you know, support the climate as well by just buying and listening to your music, and it is accessible. Because anyone can do it. Anyone who's releasing music can credit the Earth. So I think that's a wonderful way to get involved as well.
Definitely, yeah. Love Earth%. And yeah, like you said, there's so many different ways to incentivize fans, audiences, and artists as well. So thank you. And I think that is all the time we actually have. Please give a round of applause to our amazing panel, first of all. You're amazing, and I also learned a lot, as I'm sure many people in the audience did, so thank you all so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day and the conference. Thank you.
All right.